Adapting Bane has always posed a challenge for screenwriters because his comic book origin is an utterly convoluted pulp-heavy melodrama that requires a huge suspension of disbelief. I mean, even more so than the idea of a man pumping a large quantity of steroids directly into his brain. But the new Knightfall animated film may have pulled off an impossible balancing act. They've delivered the most faithful adaptation of Bane to date, precisely by tackling that backstory that everyone else ran away from. Bane debuted in 1993's Batman: The Vengeance of Bane special, and he was designed specifically to break Batman and drive a years-long crossover. His backstory is a blend of Doc Savage-like pulp tropes and gothic punishment. Born in the hellish Peña Duro prison on the island of Santa Prisca, he was forced to serve the life sentence of his fugitive father. Raised in isolation alongside his sickly mother, the young boy was cast into the general population after her death. Following a severe head injury that put him in a coma, the boy experienced a vision of his future self, warning him that to achieve greatness he had to conquer his ultimate fear, a giant demonic bat. Upon waking, he murdered the inmate responsible for his injury and was banished to a solitary confinement cell that flooded every night with the ocean tide. Surviving through sheer force of will, he emerged a legend among the inmates years later. He had transformed himself into a physical marvel and a self-taught genius, mastering multiple languages and martial arts, and built a small support network of his own with his henchmen Bird, Zombie and Trog. Upon learning of Batman, Bane came to believe this mythical hero was the literal incarnation of his childhood nightmare, and he had to defeat him in order to become the great man from his vision. When the military trialed the super steroid venom on Peña Duro's inmates, Bane used his newfound strength to escape, headed to Gotham, blew up Arkham Asylum to exhaust Batman, and ultimately broke the Dark Knight's back. The first on-screen adaptation of Bane came in Batman the Animated Series, and to say that Bruce Timm, Kevin Altieri and Mitch Bryan were not fans of the character is an understatement. But DC really wanted their newest big bad to appear in the show as a way of promoting the Knightfall event. The show's creative team immediately saw that his comic backstory was too bloated for a 22-minute episode. They completely stripped away the inherited life sentence and the prophetic bat visions, reducing his origin to a nameless prisoner subjected to military experiments. Once free, their version became a high-priced mercenary paid exclusively in diamonds. Visually, the creative team drew heavy inspiration from Mexican lucha libre culture. And while Betas portrayed Bane as clever and physically imposing, the writers deliberately highlighted an obvious tactical flaw: the vulnerable venom pump on his arm. Batman simply jammed a batarang into the mechanism, causing Bane to overdose. And I think that their BDSM redesign for the new Batman adventures said pretty much all they had to say about the character. When 2004's The Batman took a stab at Bane, they decided that they were going to differentiate themselves from Betas while satisfying network demands for kid-friendly action and merchandise potential. Their take on Bane tossed the intellectual nuance out of the window entirely, though. This Bane was purely hired muscle. In his base state, he was relatively unremarkable, but flipping his venom switch transformed him into a massive red-skinned monster with jagged teeth. Producer Jeff Matsuda reportedly said that he was inspired by blood-sucking mosquitoes that turn red after they fill up with blood when designing Bane. Bane brutally beat Batman, forcing the hero to recuperate for weeks and build an experimental Batbot mech suit just to survive the rematch. And while the episode featured impressive Hulk smash choreography, it set a disappointing precedent. Bane was pretty much stripped down to a secondary thug for hire and didn't feature prominently again. And to be honest, he didn't fare much better in The Brave and the Bold either. Their creative team played up his luchador design for laughs, treating him as a blustering brawler who didn't get the spotlight very much. Arguably the best on-screen adaptation, Young Justice, took the opposite approach, paying reference to the comic book source material without adapting it literally. They restored his Santa Priscan roots, portraying him as a sharp, calculating cartel leader controlling the island's venom supply. But they completely bypassed his birth in Peña Duro and his psychological obsession with Batman, focusing on his crime lord status instead. And I know that Harley Quinn's take on Bane isn't to everyone's taste, but I enjoyed what the writers did with him, particularly his quest to get a new pasta maker. Yes, he was a figure of fun and consistently disrespected by his fellow villains, but he was a sensitive soul, and he needed validation. It was a comical contrast with his hyper-masculine physique. And that brings me to Knightfall's version of Bane, and I suppose it's to be expected that a 3-part animated movie looking at one of the 90s most famous crossovers would be faithful to the source material. But they would have to make some serious cuts to hit the strict 70-odd minute time limit. And I have to say I was quite impressed with how they managed to both streamline and flesh out Bane's origin. The basics are the same. He was born in Peña Duro prison and was serving a life sentence for the crimes of his revolutionary father. But we got a much better look at his relationship with his mother. When he is born and she learns that he's a boy, she is distraught. She had hoped for a daughter because his sentence only applied to the male heir of the revolutionary, and this really informs the way that she raises him. While he's still young, likely less than 10 years old, his mother is clearly sick. He sneaks out of the cell to steal some food for them, and he offers it to his ailing mother first, but she refuses to take any. He must eat it all to ensure that he grows up big and strong, because that's what it'll take for him to survive in this literal hell on earth. She is the one that defines his philosophy in life. Only the strong can survive, and if she is weak, then she deserves to die. And his kindness towards her will make him weak and cost him his life in the end. When one of the inmates brings the young Bane a new magazine to read, because apparently he'd read every single book in the prison's library, knowledge is power after all, he is ecstatic. The cover of the magazine shows a strong, successful man and his beautiful family. He's everything that Bane aspires to be. He is Thomas Wayne. And Bane pores through the article over and over and over again. Thomas Wayne essentially becomes Bane's hero, but the sad fact of the matter is that he idolizes a fictional version of Wayne, the version that the article presents. Sure, it will contain factually accurate information, but it's a cultivated image that only focuses on the positives and not the totality of his character. After the boy's mother dies and he's all alone, the man with the book cart attempts to molest him, and Bane beats him to death with one of his books. Knowledge really was power in that case. When the warden scolds him, Bane lunges at him and bites off a part of his ear. The warden notes that he's not allowed to execute Bane, he has to serve his father's sentence, so he comes up with a fitting punishment. He casts him into the hole at the bottom of the prison, barely a few feet wide, and it fills with water every evening as the tide comes in. The warden mockingly throws down his magazine and wishes him luck. And while Bane initially struggles, he focuses his attention on that magazine and the image of Thomas Wayne. This gives him the strength to endure because it's what Thomas Wayne would do. He cherishes that magazine for the years that he spends trapped there, every day doing as many push-ups as he can while focusing his attention on Wayne, even as the magazine begins to degrade. Far from being a punishment that kills him, this molds him into the man that he becomes. And this is a really smart reworking of that comic book origin. It completely avoids the contrivances of a vision and stumbling across Batman, and instead makes some poignant commentary about masculinity and strength. Bane internalizes a warped blueprint of manhood, one where emotional vulnerability is fatal and physical domination is the only measure of worth. He mistakes a curated corporate fluff piece for true strength, turning his hyper-masculinity into a sad defense mechanism designed to ensure that he's never the helpless child in the dark again. Bane's escape from prison is equally streamlined. He doesn't get released after decades and allowed back into the general population. He's explicitly removed because the warden wants to use him as a test subject for the government's venom formula. So far, every prisoner they've tested it on has died, so for the warden this is a good way to kill the child who hurt him years ago. And the initial results are pleasing to the warden because Bane's heart stops. But after a few moments it begins to beat again and Bane undergoes a monstrous transformation. And this is the thing I love most about this version of Bane. Rather than taking inspiration from artists like Graham Nolan or Jim Aparo, who presented Bane in a more realistic way, they evoke the designs of Kelley Jones, who drew Bane as a massive, warped, grotesque figure. This also calls to mind the absolute version of Bane, which I've discussed at length on my second channel, Serum Lake Comics. I've linked to one of the videos in the info button, and if you want to learn more about him, then add that video to your watch later list. But getting back to Knightfall, rather than setting up an elaborate scheme where he fakes his death and then breaks back into the prison in order to escape via a helicopter, they streamline things again. Bane simply crushes his oppressors and walks out. Likewise, there are no followers or minions. Bane is his own man. And once he's free, he heads straight to Gotham to see the wonderful city that Thomas Wayne had built, but he's horrified by the state of it. What's more, he learns that his idol had been gunned down in an alleyway decades ago. And who does he blame for this? Thomas Wayne's son, Bruce. And there's the ultimate irony. While Bane spent his entire life suffering in a pit for the sins of his father, he views Bruce Wayne as a soft, spoiled heir who squandered the legacy of his. Breaking Bruce isn't just about conquering a nightmare anymore. It's Bane punishing a son for failing the father that he had idolized and ruining Gotham by coddling it. When Bane inevitably deduces Batman's identity and confronts him, the film does something previous adaptation had shied away from. He breaks Batman's spine. When other adaptations have approached this moment, they have generally softened it. Batman the Animated Series had Batman sabotage the Venom pump right before the blow landed. The Batman replaced a shattered spine with a 3-week recovery and a Batbot rematch, and Batman the Brave and the Bold didn't even come close. Here, breaking Batman's back is more than just a comic book homage though. It's the execution of Bane's ideology. He doesn't even view Bruce as worth killing. Death would be a mercy. By snapping his spine and casting him aside, Bane believes he's enforcing natural selection, proving once and for all that a soft, unearned heir was never strong enough to uphold Thomas Wayne's legacy. And that is how Knightfall finally addresses the problem with Bane. For decades, Bane's backstory was viewed as too convoluted, too pulp-heavy, and reduced him to a simple mercenary, a toyetic monster, or an insecure comedic punching bag. Knightfall shows us that the comic origin can work, with some streamlining and a coherent thematic purpose. By swapping prophetic bat visions for parasocial isolation and distorted definitions of strength, the film delivers a version of Bane that finally respects his colossal brawn and his complex, broken psychology. But what did you make of this version of Bane? Did Knightfall's streamlined origin hit the mark for you, or do you still prefer the classic lucha mercenary of the DCAU? Well hey, maybe you too really enjoy Harley Quinn's take. Let me know in the comments below. Special thanks as ever to my channel members who helped make this video possible. If you want to see your name on screen and get early access to all of my upcoming video essays, then join the channel now. Thanks for watching everyone. See you in the next one.